great work that you're doing for the community. I mean, that's really impressive. And ICON wasn't around about, what, 5 or 6 years ago, so this is really, really amazing. So I'm just here for a minute, really, to introduce the speakers. That's all I'm doing. We did do the event with ICON last September, which was an amazing event. In partnership with ICON, we brought dozens of CISOs to work with Israeli entrepreneurs in ICON's location in Palo Alto, and it was really an amazing day. So, you know, hopefully we'll do it again this year and many years to come. So now, without further ado, I'd love to introduce the speakers, even though you probably know them very well already. Folks that don't generally need an introduction, but we've got Nir Zuk here, who's, where's Nir? Right, oh, there, he's hiding. Nir, of course, is the founder and CTO of Palo Alto Networks, true industry visionary, somebody that we all look up to here in this community. Prior to that, he was the CTO of NetScreen Technology, which was acquired by Juniper and really was the basis for the Juniper firewall. Co-founded and CTO'd OneSecure, which was a pioneer in intrusion prevention and detection appliances. And of course, we all know he was a principal engineer at Checkpoint Software, one of the developers of stateful inspection technology, which we all rely on today. And the second gentleman that does not need an introduction, right here next to me, Nadav, who is of course the co-founder and CEO of Team8, which is a leading think tank and company builder. Prior to founding Team8, Nadav was the founder of the Israel Defense Forces Cyber Command. And of course, he was the commander of Unit A200, the elite Israeli intelligence unit, which spawns most of the Israeli technology industry, I would say. So without further ado, gentlemen, if you can please take the stage. Thank you.
So I just learned that you have the benefit of doing this for the second time. So I guess I'm
exactly this, but
similar. So I started my entrepreneurial journey late in life, about 6 years ago. And I have to say that when I retired from the military after 25 years of service, I thought, you know, how hard could this be, right? You know, I was in special forces. I was the commander of 8200. This is probably much easier. What I learned over the last 6 years is that it's not that easy. So, you know, building a company from scratch is, for me, and I did spend many years in tough landscapes, building a company from scratch is brutal. I think that in most cases, for the entrepreneurs in the room, you hear the stories of the winners, right? Because they write the history. But even the winners have a hard journey. So I want to start with that here and discuss that for a couple of minutes. You know, looking back, you know, 15 years into the journey. First of all, did you know that you wanted to build a category-leading big company, or were you looking for a Palo Alto network to acquire you? And second, tell us, you know, just some of the hardships along the way, apropos athletes and competitive sports.
okay. Yeah, I knew I wanted to build a big company, and that there was an opportunity to do that because network security is a big space. Today it's probably about $20 billion a year. Back then it was about half of that. And the large vendors were not innovating, which created multiple companies that always sit behind a firewall. And I just knew there was an opportunity to innovate and build something big. Of course, there are two types of companies. You either build a company that tries to displace existing vendors, usually, I mean, preferably through disruption. Other mechanisms usually don't work, like being cheaper or faster. So disrupt an existing market. The other option is to come up with something completely new and create a new category. And each one has its own advantages and disadvantages. And in the latter, you have to create a category, which is hard. displacing leaders is hard because you have to displace someone, but if you're disruptive enough, you'll be doing that. So I chose to do that, and I knew that if we were successful and lucky, then we'll be able to do it, which we did.
What was the hardest moment in the journey?
The hardest moment? I don't know.
Was there any moment where you thought, shit, this is not going to happen?
There wasn't a moment like that. No, there wasn't a moment where I thought it was not going to happen. I mean, there are moments of ups and downs, especially when you are a public company. And, but no, it was, look, when you disrupt the market, the thing that can stop you is either you're not really disrupting, but I thought we were disrupting. The thing that can stop you is if the incumbents wake up too early. And there are ways to mitigate that. But if they wake up too early and they do something which is very rare, which is figure out that you are right and they're wrong, and that they're about to be disrupted out of the market, and they try to disrupt themselves, then you're screwed.
Got it. So how many entrepreneurs in the room? Raise your hands. A lot, right? So I think basically there are two kinds of entrepreneurs in the room. Some of them, and I won't try to have a show of hands for that, but some of the entrepreneurs in the room want to become Palo Alto Networks, the next Palo Alto Networks, and some of them want to be a part of Palo Alto Networks. Some of them still haven't figured it out. I want to focus on the ones that want to become a part of Palo Alto Networks. You have a big checkbook. You've made major inquiries. You've acquired major companies in Israel. I think, how many people in Israel? About
500.
500 people in Israel. Most of them came through M&A. And I read an interview with you where you said that many of the startups, and everybody here in the room knows, especially this week, that there's a plethora of startups out there. Some of them are doing great work, some of them are doing mediocre work, some of them just have a marketing skin. How do you differentiate? What are you looking for? For those in the room who don't want to become Palo Alto Networks, but want to be a part of Palo Alto, what are you looking for?
So first, why do we acquire companies? We acquire companies mostly to accelerate our roadmap. So we have a strategy, and the strategy generates a roadmap, and we acquire startups to accelerate the roadmap. I mean, our assumption is we can do everything ourselves. It's a very Israeli assumption, right? But we can do everything ourselves, but sometimes we can accelerate things by buying startups. In reality, we can't really do everything ourselves, and there are things that either we're too late or we just don't know how to do. So for example, when we wanted to get into cloud security, we knew that taking a bunch of network security engineers and having them build cloud security is not going to work. So that required an acquisition. But in general, we buy companies to accelerate our roadmap. So that's the first thing we look for. We look for things that align with our strategy. Specifically, our strategy that you need to align with if you want us to be the acquirer, which is probably true for our major competitors, is cloud security. So we want to provide all the functions that our customers need in cloud security across all clouds, public and private, and across all compute form factors, all the way from development, CI/CD, containers, VMs, serverless hosts, and whatever else will be invented. So that's one thing. And the second area that we've made acquisitions is around security automation. Either automation of playbooks, the founder of that, one of the founders, two of them are sitting here, of the MISTO, or automation through machine learning and AI, which is based on 3 acquisitions that we've made in Israel. So that's, first you have to fit our roadmap, and these are the areas that we're focusing on today where acquisitions are relevant. The third one is we provide network security services on top of the firewall. So for example, there are many IoT security companies, maybe some of them are here. Most of them require their customers to deploy new infrastructure. We think you can run it on top of our infrastructure already. We already made an acquisition in IoT security. There might be other areas like that. So that's the first thing, you need to fit a roadmap. The second thing is it's the team. Because first and foremost, you acquire a team. So there needs to be a good match between the team. We have to have the same culture, things the same, and we always try to, before the acquisition, agree on how things are going to look after the acquisition. Sometimes we don't, right? And Slavi gets upset, but usually we do. And so we need to agree on that. And then the third thing is the product needs to be good. At least the technology needs to be good, and it needs to be proven that customers are already interested in it. And then the fourth thing that's important to us is location. So far we've acquired companies only in 2 locations. One of them is the Tel Aviv area. So not Haifa, not Beersheba, the Tel Aviv area. And the other location is here in the Bay Area, and actually in the South Bay. We haven't acquired any company that's not in the South Bay or in the Tel Aviv area. So these are the important things to us.
Thanks. So you said you either acquire in the Bay or in Tel Aviv. Let's talk a little bit about
so far, yeah.
First of all, are you going to acquire any more companies in the next year?
Yeah.
How many?
I don't know. As many as we find to accelerate our roadmap.
So he has a big checkbook, I can tell you that. It's a public company, you can take a look. Why Tel Aviv? What's the, I mean, we're an icon. Yasmin spoke about Israeli innovation. I think for a very small country in a very tough neighborhood, we obviously play way above our weight when it comes to tech, and specifically in cyber. What's the secret sauce?
So why Tel Aviv? So first, a few years ago, probably about 6 years ago, 5.5 years ago, we've made a strategic decision to open a second R&D center. Until then, everything was here in Santa Clara. And we made a strategic decision to open a second R&D center, and we decided that that's going to be in Tel Aviv. Why? Because, I don't know, half of the cyber security companies, at least worth looking at, are in Tel Aviv, and you can't miss. On the market, also a lot of cybersecurity talent in the Tel Aviv area coming out of the Israeli military. By the way, we also have a relatively big, it's not an R&D office, it's a security research office in Virginia. For the same reason we're buying in the Tel Aviv area. And so we opened an R&D center in Tel Aviv through an acquisition. We opened it through an acquisition of a company called Cyvera that was about 5 years ago, and since then we've made more acquisitions. Yeah, great cybersecurity technology developed in Israel. I think that in many cases the culture of the companies that we see there is similar to our culture because they're both founded by Israelis. And I'll tell you, what we see in Israel is really great technology. The kind of technology that you cannot usually find in the Bay Area. What I think you find in the Bay Area that you find less in Israel is the ability to productize the technology. I mean, there are exceptions. Like, you know, the Bistro was already a relatively big company, and they did a good job of both building technology and productizing it and bringing it to market. But in general, in Israel, you find companies that have great tech, but the go-to-market is not necessarily there.
Yeah, which I have to tell you personally, apropos how hard it is to build a company, I've learned the hard way after being involved in starting 8 companies over the last 6 years at Team 8, that having the best technology, it doesn't mean shit. It only means that you're in the game, right? And so I actually made a decision 3 years ago to move to New York and try to learn the language and the marketing skills and the sales team. But from my experience, how many people here are from 8200? Raise your hand. All right, so for those of you who don't know it, anybody doesn't know of 8200? All right, so I'll tell you the crazy thing about 8200 from my perspective. Now, I wasn't smart enough to start my service in 8200, so I enlisted in 88, 1988 that is. A lot of you don't know that that year existed, but it was a real year, there were real people there. And when I enlisted, it was a totally different world. When I joined 8200 in 2005, the thing that struck me that I can probably tell the story today better than I could back then is that it's the closest thing to meritocracy that I've ever seen. It's not a meritocracy, but it's the closest thing to a meritocracy that I've ever seen. It was the first time where I witnessed an environment where people really didn't care where you went to school, where you started, what degree you have, but only how much value you could bring to a team. And what struck me as amazing, and I think is very, very relevant to the talent shortage today, is the ability to screen people at a very young age, not necessarily to understand what they know, but to try to make a prediction model of what they could learn extremely fast. Condense the learning time dramatically, sometimes from what conventionally you would think would take years into months, and then miraculously just smashing them together, telling them, here's the problem, we have no clue how to solve it. In fact, we've tried before and we failed miserably, so we probably think it's unsolvable, but you're really cool and really smart, so figure it out somehow. And out of this ecosystem, there's an evergreen flow of talent that, in my opinion, is the #1 pillar of success of the high-tech industry in Israel. After I already told you what I thought, you think it's right?
Yeah, I mean, yes. I started with 8200 in 1990. And yeah, I was recruited as a kid. I mean, I was, you know, the guy you replaced as the lieutenant commander of the unit, Ron Davidson, showed up at my house one day and started asking questions. I lived in Rehovot. He showed up at my house and started asking questions. And yeah, the next 2 months later, I was in 8200.
What's the chicken and what's the egg, do you think? I mean, in terms of, do you think you would have ended up doing what you do regardless of 8200?
Probably not.
What's the revolving doors? What do you think you would have? I know what I would be doing without 8200 in the IDF.
I would have been a computer programmer. I mean, I was being a software developer, and maybe would have started a company, but certainly I would have been in cybersecurity, and I don't know if I would have been able to build such a company that I did if I weren't in 8200. Now, I didn't learn cyber in 8200. The internet didn't exist when I was in 8200, but I learned a lot still.
Yeah, no, I think I would have probably ended up a lawyer or something if it hadn't been for the IDF in 8200. And so thank God for the miracle of the IDF. I think from my perspective, it's about the sense of yes I can, or yes we can, right? You pull together a bunch of people that you don't have to tell them think out of the box because they don't even know that the box exists.
Yeah, and that's certainly the mentality in Israel. And every time we have a tough problem in the company, we try to throw it at people in Israel. Usually it works. I mean, they always solve the problem. Sometimes the solution doesn't work for the long term because, you know, cutting corners and things like that. So there are things that the Americans are good at. There are things that Israelis are good at. Americans are good at listening to customers. Israelis are good at knowing better than the customers. So you get, I think when you have a company with 2 R&D centers like that, you get the best of both worlds and sometimes the worst.
Yeah, no, I agree. So when I first moved to New York, so I was there for about a week. The first call I did was to Israel, my co-founder and teammate, who was the head of the cyber division in 8200 for the Israelis, you know, Shabbat HaTishim. And so he calls it, so I'm a week in New York. He says, so how's New York? I said, man, it's overwhelming. He says, what? I said, look, I don't speak the language. He says, what do you mean? I said, listen, I'm telling you, I don't speak the language. I walk into rooms, I don't understand what the heck they're saying. Could you elaborate a little bit about the cultural difference and what we as Israelis, and a lot of us in the room are Israeli founders, what's the way to cross the pond or to cross the chasm in that sense?
First, you have to actually physically cross the chasm and live in the US. When we look at Israeli companies and ask them how many customers they have, we always ask them to subtract the Israeli customers. They don't count. Like, being successful in Israel and being successful at selling to Israeli customers doesn't mean anything. You have to show success outside of Israel, specifically in places like the US, Japan, the first countries to usually adopt a new technology. And so you have to physically live here. Second, you have to learn how to listen to customers. And yes, we are smarter than the customers, but they are paying the bills. And sometimes customers would ask for stupid things, but you have to listen to them and figure out whether you actually have to respond to those things or not. I'll give you an example. Like at Palo Alto Networks, since day zero, we gave customers visibility, just a stupid example, of where the traffic comes from. Like, it's very simple. You take the IP address, you look it up in the database, and you know which country. So you can show them, you can give them visibility to which traffic is coming from China and which traffic is coming from Russia and different places. And then customers started asking us to block the traffic based on country. And we refused because it's a dumb thing to do. Because when you go to google.com, you don't know which country you're going to end up in, and we'll be blocking google.com 1% of the time or 0.1% of the time, and we'll get support calls about blocking google.com, and it's just those IP addresses to country mapping just doesn't work for blocking, it works for visibility. And we fought it for 2 years. And when we started losing deals because of that, we finally did it. So listening to the customers is important. Productization is important. And it's always a challenge for Israeli companies, and I've seen it in my career in the past, because product management, which is a very important function in a company. For example, when I started Palo Alto Networks, I made a decision that the company is going to be run by product management. Meaning the engineers from day zero were trained to listen to product management, and that their job is to execute, not to decide what gets built and what doesn't get built. So product management is a very important function in the company, and product management has to be close to the customers and has to be close to engineering. So where do you put them? On a plane, right? And so there are challenges across the pond or the big ocean that require some of the company to be here, some of the company to be there. So first I would cross and actually live here. Talk to your tax lawyers before you do that. It's very difficult to then undo that. No, really, before you move to the US, you have to talk to tax attorneys and figure out how you do it right. Otherwise, when you get acquired, you'll pay, I don't know, 70, 80% tax. So that's one thing you have to do. And then to learn the language, right? Learn what Americans mean when they say things, and learn how to listen. Interesting, yes. Let me think about it.
Exactly. So I first thought that when people told me interesting, they meant, this is interesting. I now obviously know that when somebody says this is interesting, I'm never going to hear from them again. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the future of, right? So this is RSA. I've been here for the last 6 years. You've probably been here for the last 20 years. So it started as a small conference. It's become crazy. This year, by the way, has anybody else noticed that it's more airy than it used to be? There's more space. So some people say that's because of cyber fatigue. I think it's just a Corona scare. I've noticed that people don't shake hands in San Francisco. This has become much more practical. But let's put Corona aside, because I don't think we have experts in the room in pandemic disease. But in terms of the future of, I want to start with trust, right? So forget cyber, and just as citizens and people that have children that are going to probably continue to live in this world, are we at a trust crisis, number one? And when I say trust crisis, I'm talking across the board, right? Politics, democracies, etc. I've heard you speak about Facebook and the Facebook conundrum. So that's number one. Number two is, as technologists, do we have responsibility and do we have tools that can cure some of that?
So this is not a cybersecurity question, I think. I mean, there is trust in cybersecurity, which is, by the way, what I think cybersecurity is about. Like 95, 99% of cybersecurity is about whether you can trust something or not. Like, can you trust the packet? Can you trust the user? Can you trust a system call on an endpoint? Can you trust the file, and so on? So that's 90-something% of cybersecurity. Are we in a trust? Yeah, I'm sure we're in a trust crisis, but I'm not an expert in that. I just see the results, right?
But do we have a responsibility? So not just to go out and make security better, but also to provide enterprise, democracies, etc., with tools that will enhance trust. So I'll give you my opinion, right? So I think we do, right? Obviously, I think that this trust, I think, in the words of much smarter people than me, we live in the best of times and the worst of times, right? We can paint a very rosy future where with big data and AI, we solve everything. And we can paint a very bleak future where AIs go out of control, trust is lost, democracies crumble down, which is already happening, and we're all doomed. And so the question is, what is our responsibility as technologists and entrepreneurs and enterprise leaders, and do we have tools that can solve some of that?
I think it's a personal choice, right? I mean, my choice is we need to preserve what we have and help trust and help establish trust. I mean, you mentioned Facebook before. I think Facebook employees think that their job is to make more money for the company. And it's not about trust, right? It's not about, I mean, they can tell themselves whatever stories they want, but in reality, some companies are about making money no matter what. And I think that in cybersecurity, most cybersecurity companies, I would like to believe, that are about making money by giving customers real technology that improves the ability to trust things. And that's how I look at it.
So let me ask you just your thoughts on this. And we had a sidebar chat on this before. So one of the things that we're starting to look at in the last couple of years at Teammate is we say, in math we trust, right? So if you think about the original open source, it's mathematics, right? And with the advance in mathematical research and the capability to run, large, to deal with large data sets, technologies like homomorphic encryption, and encryption in general, what do you think will be the talk here in 5-10 years when we think about encryption? Do you think we'll see totally different kinds of encryption? Do you think that the current kinds of encryption is threatened by quantum computing, etc.?
I'm sure yes. It's not a field I deal with, but I deal with data when it's not encrypted, when you need to do things or you need to access an application that has access to the data, and then if the application can decrypt the data but you access the application illegally, then you have access to the data. So I'm sure there will be advancements in the decryption technology and encryption technology and so on. I haven't been to RSA yet. I don't even know if I'll go to the floor, but I'm sure the theme this year is all about ML, AI, and I don't know what the theme is going to be 5 years.
What is the theme this year? In the sandbox, on the floor?
What? Data?
Human elements? Privacy and data.
Privacy and data. Human elements. I don't know, at least I saw the ads. The ads are all about AI, machine learning, and that's going to fix everything. Personally, I don't think so, but
Yeah, so
I think we're far away from
my personal view on this, and then I want to ask you, and then I want to bring some more controversial issues to the table because they told me you're very blunt and controversial.
Yeah.
And I can't leave here without having some kind of quote that they can put in the newspaper tomorrow from Nir Zuk. So, but before that, just to give you my opinion on this. So I do think that we have a responsibility. I'm telling the entrepreneurs in the room, I do think that making money is obviously essential because otherwise you're not going to be around. But it's not the whole story. And I think that we do have a responsibility. I think that cyber has become much more than security. I think it's essential. I think if you look at the current elections in our country, in Israel, here in the US, if people lose trust that the person elected really got elected, then we're in big trouble. And that's just one example. I do think that entrepreneurs in the room can solve some of that. Specifically, we're working on new kinds of encryption, which are trying to take the encryption to the edge. So for example, today, as you said, you can use encrypted data in two ways, right? You can use it in data in rest or data in motion. That has made some of the stuff that we perceive as natural to be possible today. Having encrypted data while in use is something that I think is the future of, and I think is possible. And I think that entrepreneurs that are going to double down on deep tech are also going to make a lot of money because of the privacy conundrum. So that's just my own opinion. I want to talk about something else and go back to Israel. So over the last year at least, and this also has to do with Facebook, we've seen different kind of companies coming from Israel. There's the cyber defense and cyber offense. What are your thoughts on cyber offense? Is it, should we be dealing with cyber offense? Is it legit? Does it taint everybody else? I can tell you from my experience that, when I go to customers, sometimes they're looking at, sometimes saying, I used to be the commander of 8200 is a plus. And sometimes it's like, oh really? Like, I want to trust this guy now, he's working for the Mossad.
I don't think it's a cyber offense issue. I think that, at least in the past, I had to deal with some, as an Israeli entrepreneur in the US, I had to deal with some actions that Israel or someone on behalf of Israel took in the United States and eroded the trust of the United States in Israelis. So that's...
Can you be more specific? And is there things that you're looking at right now? I mean, right now you're probably out of the woods because Palo Alto Networks is no longer an Israeli company. For many people in the room, it's essential.
It's still being used by some of our competitors sometimes. As you know, you have R&D in Israel, your founder is Israeli, and usually it goes away quickly.
What do you tell the customers? I mean, what do you tell them?
What do I tell them?
I mean, I'm just curious because I get asked this questions. Like sometimes after the presentation, when we go out of the room, somebody says, I just have a little question. Are you still connected to Mossad, and are you giving them our data?
So, look, in the early days, at least, in the early days, it's hard to sell to the US government. Okay, I mean, you just have to accept it. It's hard for anyone, but it's certainly hard for Israeli companies to sell to the US government in the early days. Don't focus on that. Even though some companies have been successful, like Twistlock, the company we acquired, an Israeli company, was very successful selling to the US government. But in general, it's very, very hard to sell to the US government in the early days. There is a trust issue. I've even heard once by US government that they trust the Chinese more than they trust the Israelis. Just look at the number of Israeli spies versus Chinese spies that were caught.
Per capita,
we're spying more. And then, even absolutely, probably, but...
Ehud Barak, when he was the chief of staff, came back from a trip to China once, and he came back and he said, I just came back from China. He said, look, I told the Chinese, think about the opportunity of collaborating. Together, we're about 1,205,000,000. Imagine the things that we can do together.
Yes. And with customers that are not government customers, for me at least, it rarely comes up. And the answer is usually, look, if they want to do something, they'll do something. They don't need me in order to get into your infrastructure. And most customers that I talk to, they don't view nation states as their opponents or what they have to deal with. They assume that there's nothing, but by the way, it's a wrong assumption, but they assume that there's nothing they can do against nation states, and they want to solve the cyber criminals and the cyber hacktivists and so on.
Cool, so Yasmin, I don't know what the rules are, but how much more time we have?
We have probably about 30 more minutes.
So, yeah, exactly. Should we open it up for other people in the crowd? Okay.
So if you have a question, raise your hand. I'll come with the mic. And I'm sure Nadav will ask more.
We'll pick on you. Come on, don't be shy. Has any of you had the situation where you were questioned with regards to who do you work for? No one?
I'll ask a question. I'm a big sci-fi fan. I watch a lot of sci-fi movies. If there was a movie about like the sci-fi, the future of cyber, like what would you imagine? What would it be? What's going to happen there?
The future of cyber defense?
Sure.
There's one company doing everything.
No, but you know, like the movies that I saw as a kid, like the things that are people developing now. Like I see something, oh look at this startup. I think this is like I saw it when I was a kid in a movie. I know what this is, and I'm thinking, you know, what's like the future, the far future for you? I mean, in Palo Alto Networks even. What do you see yourself in 10, and 15, and 20 years? The company.
No, I think that the industry has screwed up enterprise security in the sense that the way the industry evolved is every time there was a trust issue, like you needed to trust something that you couldn't trust, it was always a new set of companies that were created, funded usually by the same VCs, going after that problem. They became relatively small, they remained relatively small companies, so relatively small vendors, and customers got stuck with their products forever. Right, so first, we had to trust packets, so we created a firewall. We had to trust file on endpoints, so we created antivirus. But then we said, wait, that's not enough. What if the firewall accepted something that is actually carrying and exploiting it? Okay, let's develop IDS. And what if it has malware in it? Let's develop network-based anti-malware. But what if it's a 0 day? No problem, let's develop a sandbox. And over the years, every time we had to trust something, or every time the industry convinced us that there's something we cannot trust, and here's tech in order for you to be able to trust it, new set of vendors, and we got to a point where there are thousands of vendors, and most customers have dozens of products or vendors that they deal with in order to be able to get to the trust level that they want to get to in terms of managing risk. I think we totally screwed up enterprise security. I don't think we can fix enterprise security. I mean, we fix network security, but not all of enterprise security. I think that the cloud presents a different opportunity, meaning there's no legacy in the cloud. The cloud strategy of most of the existing cybersecurity vendors, at least those that existed 2, 3, 4 years ago, is to ignore the cloud. Right? Most of our competitors' strategy is the cloud is not going to happen, or people are going to realize they made a mistake and they're going to bring everything back to their data centers. So we need a new set of vendors for the cloud, and there's no legacy in the cloud. We think there's an opportunity to be the single vendor that everybody needs in the cloud, which is why we spent about $1.5 billion on buying cloud security companies.
By the way, so sorry for interrupting. But do you think that you're going to have new competitors in the cloud? So that is, do you think that Microsoft or Amazon or Google will say, you know, why the heck do we need Palo Alto Networks? We're giving the cloud services. We'll give you the all the solutions in cybersecurity as well.
Yeah. So we're counting on the world being multi-cloud. Most customers, at least that I talk to, are saying we're not going to trust. Just an example: Microsoft to secure my AWS deployment. So we're counting on the cloud being multi-cloud, including private cloud. And also, I think that the cloud providers are going to be a little bit like Cisco in the network security space, which is, it's a networking vendors. Network security is a side business for them, and they don't pay a lot of attention for it, which is why, they're selling the good enough. And yeah, there are customers that go for the good enough, 30% of the market, and there are customers that go for the best that they can buy, and I want to be the best that they can buy. And
let me ask you, so there's a question there, sorry.
Sure, thank you.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Adam Alfie from Iconic. We were an investor in Twistlock. And my question is, where is Prisma Cloud today? Where's it going? And what are your kind of focus areas in terms of investing in the product roadmap for Prisma Cloud?
yeah, so Prisma Cloud is our cloud security solution. It's made of 5 acquisitions so far, 2 in Israel, 2 in the US, and 1 in the US that's working for Israel. So, I don't know, 2.5. And yeah, the idea there is to do what I just said, which is we created an integration machine that can take different cloud security technologies and very quickly integrate it into a single agent, single console, working across all clouds and all compute form factors. And today it offers, I don't know, 10 different functions, and we'll get to the 50 different functions that customers need through acquisitions and through internal development. That's the plan for Prisma Cloud. And I think that there might be other vendors that will do it in the future, and that, again, the cloud is an opportunity, maybe even for a startup to compete against us, but an opportunity to do things right and get to a point where customers can use one product, one solution to secure, or at least around trust. One product to decide whether they can trust something or can not trust something across all clouds and all compute form factors. That's the idea behind Prisma Cloud. I think there's an opportunity there for others to do it. I think there's an opportunity for startups to build technology that will be part of it. On Thursday I have meetings with, I think, 12 of them that are here, just to see whether they're useful or not. And I think that's the one future for cloud security. Okay, one future for cloud security is the future that our competitors are painting, which is there's no cloud. Another future is we screw it up again and customers need to become integrators of 50 different solutions in the cloud. And the third future is there are a few companies offering complete cloud security solutions.
There's another question.
Hi, my name is Nir Zuk. I'm a product manager for Mellanox Technologies, which soon to be NVIDIA. I have a question. So one of my focus is Kubernetes. Cloud has happened, as everybody knows. So we're seeing a lot of traction around Kubernetes, cloud-native applications, and so forth. Do you have any takes on, how, in a software-defined world, what role would the hardware play for cybersecurity in the future?
Yes, I think the role of hardware for cybersecurity is certainly diminishing. I think that long-term, hardware for cybersecurity will be needed mostly in private data centers. Even at the internet edge, we're seeing more and more customers switching to a solution where the security is delivered from the cloud, and they just use the perimeter to connect to the cloud, where the security is being provided from. So it's all driven by the move to the cloud. So once you start moving applications to the cloud, right, from your corporate data center to the cloud, whether to SaaS or public cloud, the traditional approach of we're going to backhaul branch office traffic and mobile user traffic and partner traffic into our data center doesn't work anymore. Doesn't make sense to bring all the traffic to the data center and then from there go out to the cloud. So the future is there's going to be something in the cloud where all the security is already built in. You bring your traffic there very quickly, the security happens there, and then the packet goes to its destination very, very quickly.
My 2 cents for you are the following. First of all, real-time edge compute. So for example, if you think about mobility, right? So car-to-car, car-to-infrastructure, I'm sure that if I would ask you about 5 years ago, where will we be in 2020 with regards to autonomous driving? Most of us would have a much more optimistic outlook into where we would be today. And if I ask you now, where are we going to be in autonomous driving in 2025? Let's try. How many of you think that in 2030, 100% of the cars will be driven by computers, 2030. How many of you, 5 years ago, if I asked you the same question, thought that by 2030, for the most part, we won't have stupid humans driving cars that can kill us?
Oh, I mean, it's all cars or just one? I don't think in 2030 we'll have one car that's driving itself without a human.
And so for me, the answer to that is edge compute and real time. That's one area where I think hardware will matter, because I think if we can't do large real-time computation on the edge, for example, in self-driven cars, autonomous self-driven cars, I think that's one place. And the other place is homomorphic encryption and the likes of secure compute environments. So when you think about secure compute environments and the amount of compute capabilities that you need on-prem, they rise dramatically. So those are two areas that I would focus on. I do think that autonomous driving, maybe not by 2030, but I think will become a reality. I think the current reality of having about 1 million people die in car accidents every year is something that we need to start fixing. I'm not even talking about the economy of the ecosystem around that. But those are two areas where I think this will play a big game.
We have another question here.
Hello, my name is Ryan Gould. I'm co-founder and CTO of Reflective. And I want to ask you as a founder, a question that I think that most of the founders or the audience will want to hear the answer is, I know that your next company that you're going to buy is probably going to be cloud security, because that's what you said. But as a founder, I want to know if you already imagine what's going to be the other companies, the next companies. If I want to found a company today, we already have 3 years in the market, but if I want to found a new company today, what do you think going to be a field to found a company in order for you to buy it in 5 years?
So I'm not sure the next buy is going to be a cloud security company. It's going to be a company that's going to accelerate our roadmap either in cloud security, automation, security automation, or in network security, providing network security as a service on top of the firewall that we already have deployed in tens of thousands of customers around the globe. So these are the 3 areas that we focus on. There are other buyers in the market. I don't know what they're buying, but these are the areas that we are interested in.
Something that I learned over the last 6 years, I'll just give you as free advice. Build something that customers really need.
Yeah, and then I would even add to that, don't build a company to be acquired.
If you don't own your destiny, Nir is not going to buy you. So in order to own your destiny, and I learned this the hard way, believe me, build something that customers really want, need, and have a budget to pay for it. Otherwise, you're not going to own your destiny.
Yes, and don't fake it.
I think we have, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, no, don't fake it in the sense that, look, in some areas of cybersecurity, it's very hard for customers to figure out whether what you build really works or not. Okay? In most cases, we will figure out if it really works or not, as opposed to the customers. And we have the culture of we're not going to sell to customers something that doesn't work. So a lot of companies out there building AI and ML and just put that in the infrastructure, and we're going to detect the bad guys with 100% accuracy and 0 false positives and 0 false negatives, and some customers buy it because they don't know better. It just sounds convincing. It's very hard to test. We know how to test it, and we're not going to deliver something to customers that doesn't work. So
yeah, remember the old saying, you can fool some people sometimes. And luck counts, right? And so if you lucked out, you lucked out. But then you might as well go to the lottery, right? It's about the same. It's about the same result. So you need to think about what is really broken. Where is the real pain? Where is the real budget? And sometimes it's very mundane. Sometimes it's because of policy. Sometimes it's because of compliance. It's not necessarily something that you think is really cool.
We have time for one last question. So.
Thank you. My name is Zafrir with Fortinet. wanted to ask about your thoughts, challenges, and opportunities with the 5G and deployment of 5G, what it means for security. Thanks.
So, what does 5G mean for security? I mean, 5G is going to have a lot of localized traffic, maybe. So, yeah, I'm sure that some hardware devices will need to support 5G and maybe become the 5G edge device in order to be able to secure 5G traffic, unless you convince service providers to deploy security inside the local 5G infrastructure, right? Because in 5G, there's going to be a lot of traffic that stays locally. You know, I really think that hardware-based network security is becoming a niche. I mean, it's still a big market and it's important, and we need to focus on it, and you need to focus on it, and so on. But you know, that question comes from one of these vendors I was referring to before, that whose cloud security is to ignore the cloud, right? So the world is moving to the cloud. There's nothing you can do about it. The world is moving to public cloud, to private cloud, to SaaS. The real problems are there, and that's where I would focus.
Yeah, I do think that, you know, there, in some way, 5G is an opportunity to create a different kind of cloud, right? A cloud that's not necessarily a big hole in the ground with a lot of chillers, where, you know, you can optimize and use idle resources in different areas. And I think this will bring opportunities to incumbents that don't even think about themselves as cloud providers, right? So if you think about legacy, you know, bank branches, if you think about large supermarket chains, all of a sudden, I think with 5G they can, you know, start to attack back on the current cloud incumbents that have a big hole in the ground. Neil, what do you think? But 5G is interesting in one other, again, I just, if you have any thoughts on Huawei and the whole controversy on 5G and the infrastructure.
I think we've seen again and again that there are certain countries around the world that will do everything they can to interfere with the supply chain, especially the United States. Companies and buyers. That's why we chose to do everything in the United States. So first, our R&D is in the US and in Israel. We don't do R&D in countries where, you know, you can't trust the local population. We, or the government, we manufacture all our hardware in the United States, here in California. It's expensive, but it's worth it. We manufacture our silicon in the United States. It's expensive, but we think it's worth it from a supply chain perspective. We are one of the very few cybersecurity vendors, the large ones, that doesn't have the required certification to sell in China, in Russia, to the governments and to other, to some regulated industries, because China and Russia and a few other countries like South Korea require you to provide them the source code in order to be able to sell to the government. We just don't. I mean, all our competitors, including the company this gentleman is from, have provided their source code to the Chinese and the Russians.
So let me ask you...
in order to get certified to be able to sell there, which is crazy. Like, why would you do that?
So let me ask you a very specific question. Again, as entrepreneurs in the room, so now here's your hypothetical situation. You're raising your A round, and you have two options. You can take money from an investor here in the Silicon Valley at valuation X, or you can take money from a Chinese investor at valuation 4X? 4X? Now, legit, right? They have an office here in the Silicon Valley. They're very nice people. They have perfect English, you know, and they're great people. What do you do?
I think it depends on the terms of the deal, but
1X to 4X.
No, not just that.
All
1X to 4X.
All else is all else is exactly the same.
The question is, what can they force you to do? Like, if they can force you to manufacture in a country,
they tell you, look, we'll just give you our money. You know, we can't hide the fact that we're Chinese investors, and this is, I think, something that entrepreneurs deal with maybe on a daily basis when you go for rounds. Everything else equal, we're not forcing you to do anything. You take the lead. We'll have 25% of your equity. We'll have a board seat. All else is equal. 1x to 4x.
So, I think that one of the important things in investors is not just the money, but also what else they bring to the table. And what do they take? So, at least in my experience, we raised our Series A from two of the top investors in the world, Sequoia and Greylock. It's not easy, right? You need to have some history to do that, but the most important aspect of what they've done for us is help us hire. Right? I mean, you know, executives, when they hear Sequoia and Greylock, they want to join.
So VP level?
So, yeah, VP level, other board members, CEOs, we hired a few of them over the years. It's important whom you raise money from, right? Good people want to work for companies with good money behind it. So that's one thing. The second thing, of course, that they help with in the early days is with the roadmap, with access to customers. Many of the better VCs have CISO councils, which is basically a set of people that they give stocks that you can buy. So they buy your products, which is important in the early days. So that's what I look at. It's not really which country they come from. It's the quality of the individuals and the firms that they use.
You wouldn't veto taking dollars from non-US Chinese/Russian investors.
If they cannot force me to do things that I don't want to do, like for example, we've had deals in the past that we didn't sell because the buyer was a company that we didn't believe in their values. Like for example, governments that were oppressing citizens, we shut down deals that we won and didn't sell them because of that. So, no, if there's no way for my investors to force me to sell to people I don't want to sell to, and again, there have been a few of those in the past, and they cannot force me to reveal my source code to certain governments so I can sell there and so on, then, you know.
So, last question, very short. So, you're much younger than I am, so I want to ask you, what do you want to do when you grow up? Like, you built this company, what's next? Like,
so I'm a year younger than you, right?
Just about.
About a year and a month, yeah. What do I want to do next? After Palo Alto Networks?
When you grow up, like, what should we say, like,
I'm happy where I am. You know, I mean, one thing that I always say in Icon 101 sessions, I try to speak at all of them. The entrepreneur sessions is, I never wanted to be a CEO. I, by the way, think that it's a mistake for most of the people in this room to be CEOs. Number one, it's a waste of time for technical people. If you're technical, it's hard to find, focus on technical stuff. And second, if you're successful, then you're probably the wrong person to run the company. You know, let a professional American person with sales and marketing and product experience run your company. You're going to need a sitting wall anyways, and then later in life, when it's time for you to step down and have someone come in and take the company to the next level, it's going to be very hard for you to stay. You know, it's very hard for. So I always wanted to be a CTO. Unfortunately, I have two people reporting to me. One of them is the CISO of Palo Alto Networks, and the other one is just an individual contributor, which, you know, is my special ops person that goes and does specific things in the company. I don't like to manage people. I don't want to manage people. I'm happy where I am, and I don't want to grow from here in that perspective.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot. I do think this is a great time to live in, by the way. We're privileged to be in this business at this time, being able to make these kinds of dents in the world. So, pretty good times. Thanks.
Thank you.